This video will blow your mind. You ready?
And here we go.
Now, if you've been following Trill Black since we started, you'd have seen how history has left all sorts of clues about who the ancient Egyptians actually were. You know, how the fathers of Egyptology emphatically concluded that the Egyptians were a black people, many doing so very reluctantly. And before that, we saw how ancient sources like the Bible, whatever you make of it as a religious book, clearly place Egypt firmly within the interior of Africa, not this Mediterranean lie a lot of wannabes are currently spouting. Now that's all well and good, but guess what?
I've got information, man. New come to light.
Well, not new so much as rediscovered. See, it turns out indigenous writing systems from deeper within Africa also potentially point to the ancient Egyptians having been a black people. How? Well, right now you're looking at the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph for the word face. That's the word face. Very Mediterranean look there.
I think not!
Now, it might seem strange that the ancient Egyptian word for face, written down in Egyptian hieroglyphics, is literally just a drawn face. But not when you understand that writing systems almost always begin or are based in some logographic or pictographic element. The Chinese writing system today is still fundamentally pictographic, as is Japanese and a lot of other South Asian scripts. Now, Egyptian hieroglyphs were no different, and neither was something called Insibidi, a West African writing system some academics have theorized could be a real-life language fossil, proving that the ancient Egyptians migrated and settled deeper within Africa at some point in time. Now, somebody who I've spoken about before and who is currently doing amazing work on the cultural and linguistic similarities between the ancient Egyptians and other black cultures deeper within Africa is Kweli Mika. You have to check out at least one of his many videos on this topic, guys. Links are in the description below. His work on this is simply amazing. If you do happen by his way, tell him Trill Black sent you. But back to Insibidi. In her book, A History of African Societies to 1870, Elizabeth Isichei gives a brilliant Reader's Digest of what Insibidi is. She says, Insibidi is, quote, a script found among the cross-river peoples which owed nothing to foreign influence. Each symbol is an ideograph, as in Chinese. Because each symbol represented a concept, it could be used between peoples speaking different languages, and over 500 signs are recorded. End quote. So Insibidi, as Miss Isichei points out, is indeed a script, and as it was a script based on ideographs as opposed to concrete words of any one language, different dialects along the southeastern region of Nigeria and north of what is today Cameroon were able to use it for writing while still understanding what each other meant. Now, there are very few surviving examples and manuscripts of Insibidi that remain, but some were preserved by a Scottish missionary working in the Calabar region of Nigeria during the early 1900s. Ironic, because part of why we know very little of Insibidi today is as a result of the stigma attached to it by missionaries who condemned it as witchcraft. We'll come back to this later. For now, the missionary Reverend James K. McGregor, in his diary entry titled Some Notes on Insibidi, recorded several accounts written in Insibidi. One of them is this recording of a family judgment made by village elders in a family dispute. It reads, quote, a man who committed adultery with a woman who now lives apart from her husband must compensate both her husband and the woman's family for the shame he has brought to them. End quote. Awkward. All of this, according to the late Professor Robert Farris Thompson of Yale, explodes the myth of Africa as a continent without a tradition of writing. I mean, you can't really say Africans didn't have writing when they were using it to record civil court cases amongst each other. Professor Robert Farris Thompson also broke down the word Insibidi, concluding that it meant bloodthirsty or cruel letters. Why? Well, because it was almost only understood and used by elite members of the various Igbo, Efik and Ekoi kingdoms to record harsh judicial, often capital punishments against a criminal or to make war plans. Pretty fair if you're the criminal getting hanged because of a judgment written down in Nsibidi against you. I'd say that's fair. Then again, you do the crime, you pay the time. Is that the phrase? Anywho, but effectively you had members of a famous but secretive priest sect known as the Ekpe or Leopard Society using this script to pass messages to each other about state affairs and judicial decisions. Okay, stop right there. Does any of this sound familiar to anyone? A hieroglyphic writing system using mainly symbols employed by a secretive priest class whose namesake is that great African animal, the leopard. A hieroglyphic writing system, the understanding of which is kept secret by this elite occult class and which is thought of as sacred by the uninitiated. When and where else on the African continent did such an approach to writing exist? Yep, that's right. And once again, we're back to where it all began. It's like the great Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop said, quote, "Ancient Egypt was a Negro civilization, and the history of Black Africa will remain suspended in the air and cannot be written correctly until African historians dare to connect it with the history of Egypt." End quote. Now maybe you're like me and didn't even know that the very word hieroglyph is a combination of two Greek words meaning sacred carving, and that itself is only a translation of what the Egyptians called their writing system, God's words. What's more, contrary to what a lot of people think, hieroglyphs weren't something your everyday Egyptian could read. They were legible mainly to the priest class, and their understanding was guarded very closely by this priest class. We're talking probably less than 1% of the population could read this stuff. And just like in Nsibidi, hieroglyphic characters were legion, literally over 1,000, unlike the 26 characters A to Z of our modern writing system. Our writing system is a purely phonetic writing system based on sounds, without the symbolic or ideographic elements of the Egyptian script and Nsibidi. Another interesting thing to note is the name of the secret society that guarded Nsibidi, the Ekpe Society. And what did Ekpe mean? It's the Ekoi people's word for leopard. What were the priests of ancient Egypt known for wearing almost exclusively? Leopard skin. The obsession with the leopard is a motif you will see again and again amongst the black peoples of Africa. Now, I'm not the first person to make this connection. Even as early as when Nsibidi was first being discovered by the colonialists, Reverend McGregor was addressing this claim of a link to Egypt in his notes. So you're going to have to take it up with all the other academics that have seen the link and not just little old me. But there's still so much more that could be said about Nsibidi, like how it was carried over by enslaved Africans to America and was used by the slaves as a way of passing secret messages to each other, later on forming part of the system of symbols used in Brazilian and Haitian voodoo. Then there's how Nsibidi was the inspiration behind the fictional writing system used by natives of Wakanda in Marvel's Black Panther series. But I won't go into details on both these points, I'll just add this. Nsibidi is thought to be several thousand years old by some. There are stone carvings in Nigeria comfortably predating contact with Europeans which have Nsibidi inscriptions on them. But it's still very hard to tell how far the script has evolved or what has been lost from it over time. So more definitive clues linking it to a possible ancient Egyptian migration deeper into Africa is needed. The only problem is that political instability within Africa makes a lot of this type of research pretty much impossible. Also, the script's esoteric and secretive nature is partly the reason for its downfall. It wasn't widely disseminated, so if the few people that knew the script died and didn't pass it on, it was lost forever. Add to that the damage that colonialism did in that it drew people away from their traditional practices and forced them to assimilate with newer and foreign ways. Against all of this, Nsibidi didn't stand a chance, but somehow it survived. And now black people across the world who can trace their roots back to West Africa are rediscovering their history, putting the pieces together themselves. In that same vein, it's over to you guys. Is there anything we missed out in this video about Nsibidi? If you're watching this and you practice Nsibidi and can read or write the script, please let us know down in the comments. Or is there any specific dates we can pin Nsibidi's origin to that you know of? Again, please let me know down below in the comment section. Or if you want, you can get in touch and follow us on Instagram at TrillBlackGram. All that being said, we're not done with African scripts. We've got an even more mysterious script coming up in the next video in this series. I can't wait for that one, guys, so please stay tuned. For now though, we're keeping it trill and we're repping black right, no doubt.